big moment really was a couple of years ago, I think, and I did talk about this on the first time I was on the Spirit Box. And I had this really scary sort of spirit attack situation, and I combated that with conjure techniques that included some Solomonic magic,
Right.
but also included ultimately work with Saint Michael.
Mhm.
And it was incredibly effective, like immediately viscerally effective. And it was at that point that I was like, oh shit, well, something's happening here, and I know that not everybody has that experience in terms of sorcery and magic. Actually, you and I, before we started recording, were kind of talking about
Mhm.
the individual experience of magic and sorcery, and what works for one person just truly may not for another.
Yeah.
But for me, communion with the saints, appealing to the sort of higher and ultimate authority of God while doing magic and sorcery and living in that kind of like odd liminal interstitial space, which makes you kind of like doubly a heretic. You're an occultist heretic and you're also a Christian heretic.
Yeah.
You're both.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's actually nothing more witchy than being doubly ostracized and sort of doubly shut out.
Hello and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Today we welcome back to the Spirit Box Celeste Mott. Celeste is a poet, she's a witch, she's a writer, and she's a practicing Catholic. And you might ask yourself, how do those things align? Well, Celeste is going to lay it all out for you in her own wonderful and insightful way. This is a fun conversation and one I really enjoyed, it, but not least because of Celeste's wit. But it's interesting listening to someone kind of manage a public persona and perceptions that are external to you, and see how she navigates that, because it's an interesting lesson for people there. Not least on the opinions you give and the opinions you accept. But in the world that we live in now, where some of our lives are on display to a degree, I think it's useful to get insight from people who are navigating that and navigating it really well, like Celeste does. It's also quite a fun conversation as Celeste takes us through the process of summoning her boyfriend and how she enchanted to bring the person she desired, the qualities that she wanted that person to have, and how she brought them into her life quite successfully. It works. It does work. We also get into relationship synchronicities, how magical workings would throw up your shadow, the stuff you got to deal with. And we get into a lot of that in the plus show, that like really, when your magic is successful, there's going to be a blowback, and that blowback tends to be something you need to work on in yourself. And try not to shy away from that. It's hard because it's hard. We get into dual practice around the Virgin Mary, we get into Marian apparitions, and we kind of go down a fun diversion on the various different saints and who we've called upon in the past and what have you. But most of all, we get into how Celeste manages being recently baptized into Catholicism and being a sorceress at the time. Spoiler, she handles it really fucking well. And if you want to hear that, if you want to hear the plus show, just join the Patreon, clicky linky, and away you go. Now, I'm going to be taking a couple of months off from the pod to really to focus on some film and photographic ideas that I have that have been floating around for a while. But the back catalogue is all going to be there, and I'm going till the end of March. You can still join. Things will go on pause. It won't cost you any money, and you can enjoy all the back catalogue, which is a thing of beauty, if I say so myself. Now, I've made a little addition to the podcast intro just to give shout outs to cool stuff that's coming out of the community around Spirit Box, not least the great people who kindly support me in the show. But I kind of wanted to extend that to also just highlight other really cool stuff that I've seen out there that I enjoy in the kind of the paranormal, magico, esoteric broad bracket. So first up, Vic Highland He's got a really, really cool book called Music, Magic and NLP. You might know Vic from the Creativity Podcast. He was on Douglas Baxter's show talking about William Burroughs, which prompted me to remind me that I had to give this book a shout out because it's really cool. And Vic was kind enough to send me a copy, and it is well worth your time. And also go and listen to Vic's podcast. It's fucking nice. Yours truly was on it. Now this next one sounds fucking amazing. So Peter Mark Adams is doing a tour in Egypt in May. So if you want to go and explore some of the ruins, the magnificent, incredible antiquities of Egypt with none other than Peter Mark Adams, I mean, I really can't think of anybody else that I'd like to do that with more than Peter, because he's just fucking awesome. And he can read a building, its symbolism, its structure, its shape, and take all that and unpack it and reveal the mysteries held within, just like he did with the Hagia Sophia, so it's going to be really, really good. Link is in the show notes on that one. And finally, Sasha Ravich has released a new limited edition zine. If you enjoy Sasha's writing, and I really do, she's a fantastic mythopoetic flair to her work, and this particular piece is called Hell's Fishmonger and the Antimatter Fountain. And that is a 21-page zine exploring Saturn and Pisces as the king of the sea devils and his connection to our galaxy's antimatter fountain in the Milky Way. And it includes some rites there, channel message, and some additional magical working. Sasha's stuff is always awesome, so that's I think I guarantee you'll enjoy that. And last but not least, and I'll share the details properly about this in the coming weeks, but I'll be talking about gin for Gin and Tonic 2 in Turin this coming June. It's Turin in Italy this coming June, which I'm really looking forward to. And looking forward to catching up with the crew again and meet some new people as well. So if you're in Europa around that time and we haven't been nuked, then pop along. The last one was fantastic and a lot of fun. And this one promises to be equally wonderful and in a far nicer climate. So I will leave it there. Let's get on with the show. Celeste Mott, it is lovely to have you back on the Spirit Boxes. You're very welcome.
It's so delightful to be back on the Spirit Box. It's lovely to see your face again after seeing it in person.
Indeed.
6 months ago?
Yeah. That was it was fun to catch up, and then we dropped into Treadwell's. That was
it was a lovely time. That was a lovely time. It was I was so compressed for time in that 2 weeks that I was in the UK. So I think I told you I was floating around all over the place.
You were all over the place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got some serious problem.
Yeah, because I had family all over the place. Family in Cornwall, family up north. And my uncle was in the process of passing away. So we were up there and all over the place. But I'm just really glad that I got to sneak in at the last minute, right before I left, to come and high five you in person. It was delightful.
Awesome. Well, it's great to see you again. And you've been busy. I've been following you on Insta and your recent adventures over the last couple of months with interest. And we're going to kind of dip into that today. But to get the kind of ball rolling, for those of you people who aren't familiar with you, could you give people a bit of your background and who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Celeste Mott. I am a professional occultist, sorcerer, witch, spiritual advisor. I don't know. I wear many hats. It depends on who I'm talking to and what hat they are more comfortable with, to be honest, at this point. I think I said the same thing the last time I was talking to you on the podcast. It's hard for me to kind of find a identity label that I feel entirely encompasses who I am and what I'm doing. That's why I like Aidan Watchter a lot. I like that he kind of just came up with his own little niche, and he was like, dirt sorcery. That's what I'm doing. I need to put my mind to that and come up with some sort of neologism that I can apply to myself. But yeah, so I do a little bit of everything. I'm a professional occultist. tarot reader. I do spell work and magic for hire as well.
Mhm.
Trance work, vision work for clients. That's my full-time gig. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm from England originally, which is why I was back there in
Yeah.
August, high-fiving Dara. Um, and yeah, I'm also a writer, and I just kind of float around, and the people who find me are supposed to find me, I feel like, because I don't put a lot of concerted effort anymore into marketing myself. I kind of
Yeah.
had a oh, I think, because I can't remember the first time you and I talked on the pod. It might have been 2020,
Yeah.
um,
It was in the early
or
days.
or
Yeah.
2021. It was early on,
Yeah.
and I think my approach to being like a public occultist has changed
Mm.
since then.
Mm. Mm.
And so I don't really aggressively market myself anymore, and I don't put out a ton of content, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah.
I scaled back, in fact, my Instagram massively over the past couple of months, and like I
Mm.
archived 2,000 posts or something crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a lot more sort of intentional about what I'm putting out into the world these days.
Mm.
Realizing that not everything needs to be super public, and that it's kind of a losing game in some ways to try and
Mhm.
outwit the algorithm at every turn. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you say that. I mean, it comes up a lot on this show. But I have noticed a lot of people actually kind of like de-investing
mhm.
from various different platforms. I'm not really sure what that is. Like I have my own reasons for kind of why I keep things at arm's length. Um, some of them are magical to some
Mhm.
degree, you
Yeah,
know. Others I think are really around kind of yeah, I just think it's not good for me, you know.
yeah,
And I don't say that in a pious way. I mean that, like, if I got into it, I'd get too into it, you know.
yeah.
I think that's just, I think, personal thing. But yeah, I've really noticed a lot of people kind of in there. I think maybe there might be kind of a fatigue that people have kind of
I
culturally.
think I think that's 100% it. Because even some of the people I know who I would put like squarely in the influencer box, people
Yeah,
who are sort of doing this professionally, and they are in that kind of,
yeah,
they rode that TikTok, the witch talk wave, and they really
yeah,
grew massive accounts and became very like polished and on point, and they were
yeah.
on TikTok and all of that. And even some of those people now are just like, ugh, like I don't have the energy anymore to keep
Mm,
feeding
mm,
this beast. And I think that a lot of us have realized too that even if you are doing this professionally, it's your full-time job. You don't actually need 500,000 people to see the video you made on
yeah, yeah.
how to, make a
Mm,
spell jar. Like, it's not necessary.
mm.
15,000 teenagers watching that is not actually going to pay your bills.
Yeah,
All you need is, you know,
yeah, yeah,
the right people to find your work,
yeah,
really. And so I'm lucky in that way. I think I've got a great core group of really, really, truly wonderful clients who I love and respect, and I've been working with for a good long amount of time. And
yeah. That's awesome.
then, through those people,
Mm.
occasionally new people find me, and it all kind of works out. So
Awesome, awesome.
it's ticking along over here,
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I think it was a couple of years ago,
Mm.
you had a real kind of shift.
Yeah.
For those of you who have maybe have not noticed a perfect segue in the editing here, we've got a 5 minutes of internet fuckery there that we've to work our way through.
The
Um,
spirits were like, "Don't talk to this crazy lady, Dara. What are you doing? Don't do that." Someone was like, what were we saying though? We were saying
well, yeah,
what I went through, I guess,
yeah.
in
A couple of years
past
ago,
couple of years.
yeah, you went through kind of being a kind of a public figure as a witch, in kind of the, I guess, the kind of the internet, Instagram, occult circles. And then you discovered, or rather rediscovered, um, Christianity has been an important
Mhm.
piece to you. Um, I just kind of wanted to kind of ask you, like, what was that like? You know,
Yeah, yeah. So I
I,
think I
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no, you go ahead.
Well, I see publicly, like, like, you cop a lot of shit for it,
Mm.
which is, I mean, from Christians and occultists, which is,
Mhm.
you're in this weird kind of no man's land between kind of both places, I guess, because you inhabit both places. But
Hmm.
I can imagine that's quite isolating at times, frustrating at times. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it definitely can be. I think the beautiful thing about it, um, because I try to, it can be isolating, it can be frustrating. Particularly recently, there was a reel that I made, um, and in some ways it's a little bit calculated. There was somebody else in our community who had a fairly large Instagram following making tarot content, and this person had a sort of I don't know, a spiritual reawakening or of some kind, and slipped aggressively into a radical traditional Catholic space from a tarot space, and he basically wiped everything off his account and
mm,
decided to make all these insane comments about how the Pope was the false Pope, and it went a bit wacky, and cynically, because even though I just gave you a whole spiel about how I'm divesting from the social media presence, cynically I was like, oh, I bet I can catapult off this to get to get some Instagram views. I bet I can ride that wave. Um, and also because I happen to, but by complete coincidence, I happen to have gotten baptized Catholic the
mhm,
exact same day as this person who
mm,
who has a much bigger account than me had made this post about being a rad trad, basically. And so people who followed both of us were sort of drawing these odd parallels and freaking out a little bit. They were like, "Okay,
right.
wait, what? You got baptized? Like, what the hell is happening there?" And they were kind of trying to put me in the same box as
Right.
him, and he was
Yeah.
making all these horrifying comments that absolutely did not align with anything that I believe in.
Yeah.
So I made this Instagram reel clarifying that I had gotten baptized, but also that this was what that meant for me and how that went down for me. And I had a feeling that it would pop off a little bit, but I did not think that we would still be steadily growing in views 3, 4 weeks later. And now
Wow.
it's at something like 37,000 views or something
Fucking
wacky.
hell.
I know. I mean, which is not really, it's not a huge number of views in the grand scheme of things. But what happened, I think, is that initially Instagram was just showing it to my followers.
Yeah.
And I did get a little bit of pushback from some of my followers who were like, what? But at the same time, like you said, this journey for me has actually been going on for a couple of years. So
Yeah.
anyone who's really paying attention to what I'm doing on the internet, that probably didn't come as a huge surprise to them. They were just like, oh, okay, now you're baptized. What does that mean? But then Instagram started promoting it to conservative Catholics, and they were not happy at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were very upset. And that's been, I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to wake up every day and have a ton of notifications in your social media from people
Mm,
basically being like, well, you're going to hell.
mm,
And, demanding to know, like, you're not a real Catholic, like, who baptized you? Like, you should talk to your priest about this. Like,
mm.
I, a stranger on the internet, I'm entitled to know your entire spiritual life story because you're
Yeah.
doing something that I disagree with or I don't like. And it is tough. But I guess the reframe for me and what I've had to do to sort of process some of that, I think I'm very lucky in that I have found within that weird interstitial space in that like two worlds, a number of other people who also occupy that space. And there's a
Right.
couple of
Okay.
people, in the Instagram realm, specifically my little witchy social media friends, who are doing kind of a similar thing, like a syncretism, folk Catholicism, dual faith kind of path. Some of
Mhm.
them probably wouldn't even refer to it that way. Um, like, not to name drop, but off the top of my head, there's Voga and Ryan who do the Red Text podcast, and they
Mm.
for sure I think would consider themselves folk Catholic. They are witches, they are occultists, but they also are Catholic and they go to mass, and they do Catholic things. And
Yeah.
their podcast is great. They talk a lot about that stuff. You've got, Hoodoo Moses, who is not a Catholic. He's Jewish, but he's, adopting a religious perspective, but he's still a
Yeah.
conjure man. That's how he makes his living. That's who he
Mm,
is as a person. Ed Calderon, Ed's manifesto.
mm.
Um, Similar situation. I'm fairly certain Ed identifies as a Catholic. He's also a Santa Muerta devotee, and I think would probably call himself an occultist. So you've got these people who are doing this, and I think knowing those people and having that community of people who are walking a similar path to me has been very grounding,
Right.
because the part I find frustrating when all these very conservative or very traditional Catholics or slightly more myopic cultists find my content and lose their minds about it. What I find frustrating is they say things like, you can't do that. And I'm like, first of all, literally I am. So yes, I can. I don't know what to tell you. Secondly, people do, and they've been doing it for
Yeah.
hundreds of years. And if you go, like if you go to parts of Ireland, if you go to certainly Latin America, Mexico, you will have, little old ladies who are practicing in this way, and they wouldn't even call it sorcery. They'd say, "I'm just a Catholic."
Yeah,
Do
100%.
I also have, do I also have a folk saint statue to say, Santa Muerta in the back of my garage that I, pray to? Yes. But I'm a Catholic. I go to mass
Yeah.
and I believe in God, and that's who I am. And I think, a lot of people who make these slightly more ignorant comments just don't have an awareness of that. Because they've never encountered it or they weren't raised that way. A lot of it is the very, very hyper white American perspective, which is very sheltered in its own way. It's oddly evangelical in its approach, which is strange because Protestantism and Catholicism are fairly wide apart. So it's been an interesting time. I would say I probably have recently been getting more pushback from conservative religious people than I have from people in the occult community, but it does come from both sides.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, when you look at, you famously have that kind of like Catholic paranoid, or sorry, Christian paranoid articles about kind of like the tools of the devil and kind of like the entry points into Satanism, which are like tarot, astrology,
Right.
yoga, like and we all laugh at it, like, but I was thinking about this a lot actually, kind of looking at kind of your content and kind of seeing something similar around that, those type of articles about these are the entry points into Satanism, and I was reflecting on it. I was like, well, in a way, there is a certain percentage of people who are engaged in those activities that kind of do end up in what you would consider, if you were, super Christian.
Yeah.
You probably would consider our Satanist.
Yeah. Well, that you're totally right, and
Mm,
that's the thing. That's the thing that makes it difficult to even have these conversations across these boundaries, I think, or
mm,
across these spaces. Because somebody on one of my posts the other day was like, "Oh, well, you're a Satanist," and I was like, "No, I'm not." However, when extremely conservative Christians are using the term Satanist, they are
mm.
using it in a way that is completely different to how people in the occult community would use the term
Yeah,
Satanist.
exactly.
They mean something totally different. And so, I mean, just by the laws of logic, right? If you're not
Mm.
agreeing on terms, you can't even have a description. It's not
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. You're so right. That's really
So,
yeah, yeah. I had a
so
funny
it's a tough
experience.
one.
Yeah, I had a funny experience, like which I mentioned actually, in the last show, which was I ended up kind of chatting to a couple in a local pub while I was reading a book by Robin Artisan,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
and and I was sitting under a witch bowl. The witch bowl, like it's an old, it's kind of the pub's 1,000 years old kind of place. We have those in England.
Fancy. All right.
How
Just
old's your
flex
pub?
on us.
Ours is 1,000 years old. But yeah, it's the history of the place is hilarious. It's like the cellar is the oldest part because it was burnt down by the French like a couple of times. It's just like,
Nice.
you know, one of those piracy and smugglers and all that kind of shit. But yeah, I was sitting under the witch bowl and reading this book, and this couple slightly started in kind of, just chatting, but it was my own fault. I was fucking yapping away and kind of, engaged with them, like, 2 points in, I'm like, yay, I'm
Right,
everybody's
right.
friend, and but it got a little bit uncomfortable because she visibly started getting uncomfortable because she was asking me kind of, what are you reading,
Mm,
because on the, I think on the cover of the book, I can't remember, it was what was it called, the Horn of Evenwood,
mm,
which was a grimoire of sorcery. So kind of I'm sitting there reading that, and then and really kind of not being self-aware. But what it did really make me
Mhm.
realize afterwards is that like a lot of people are really fucking uncomfortable with that, and
Yeah.
it means like red flag beyond red flag to them.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that you're getting that kind of reaction from the Christian community. What I find,
Yeah, it's frustrating a little bit.
mm,
Um, I mean, well, I guess it's a lot frustrating
mm,
because I am somebody who does. I've always appreciated rational and logical discourse, like
yeah,
particularly in, I guess, the last 5 to 6 years, as I've sort of slowly started to try and divest
yeah,
from the systems and the structures that are trying to keep us in this very enraged, inflamed, hyper emotional,
mm,
reactive space. And I've been trying
mm,
to kind of pull away from that purposefully for myself, my own mental health. You know, talking to people who believe different things to me and having logical,
yeah,
rational, sane debates is important to me.
mm,
And so it gets very frustrating when I am trying to have a measured discourse and explain, like, well, here's some information about this topic that you, the person I'm speaking to, may not be aware of.
mm,
Would you like to share some information with me that I might not be aware of? Let's have a discussion. And you can't even do it because people do, understandably, get so viscerally uncomfortable based on their specific myopic kind of view of the
yeah,
subject at hand.
mhm, yeah.
It's disheartening.
Mm. Well, a great admiration for that stance, Celeste. I think that's a really good
I
way to
try.
be. Yeah, but I mean,
Ooh,
it's a hard one to maintain, as you said. Like it's we have a culture of outrage and kind of reactionary call out culture, and which is strange. It's just like I kind of
mm,
observe it and I go, why are you doing that? That's really
yeah.
odd, you know.
Because it's incentivized, because we've
Mm,
all gotten hooked on the dopamine hit that we get from feeling
mm,
righteously, um, righteous in our judgments, whatever those judgments may
mm.
be, and, that comes from all sides, and all
Oh yeah, yeah,
aspects, and all political divides, and all religious divides, and
yeah,
people want to feel righteous, and they want to feel
yeah.
just, and they
Mm,
get a lot of validation in the form of, like, oh yeah, and I said the right thing, and I did
mm,
the right thing, and I stood up for my values, and
mm,
I smoked the bad guy,
mm,
and increasingly I just don't. I mean, obviously there are people who are doing horrible things
mm.
in the world, but I don't really know that I believe in the bad guy per se.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if we want to talk about Satanism and adversaries, I
yeah,
just
yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people who just have very, very different lived experiences and very different perspectives.
Mm,
And if we could try and find a way to speak to each other about things, maybe things would get a little better. So,
mm,
like, my approach these days is I try and check myself if I'm getting defensive and frustrated, and I try and sort of walk away and not respond
mm,
from a place of um, impulsivity. Somebody on that reel that got a lot of traction was sort of insulting me and being a dick the other day, and I responded to them as rationally and calmly as I could, and then they had a funny username. I forget what it was. It was something like, um, it had TARDIS in the. It was like a Doctor Who reference,
right.
and so they made this comment. It was very unkind toward me and making a lot of assumptions about my spiritual path. And I replied, refuting their points. And then I was like, I
Mm,
love your username. I said, I have a Doctor Who tattoo. I love Doctor Who. I love your username. And their entire tone changed when they responded to me. They were like, "Oh, thanks. Doctor Who's the best. Um, anyway, I hope you have a good day." And I think
yeah.
a lot of the time it's just attempting to find a commonality
Mm,
so that you can actually have the discussion. Because a lot of people just don't know. I mean, there's a shitload of stuff I don't know.
mm,
Holy fuck. Pardon my
mm.
French.
No, it's okay.
I'm always happy for people to correct me if I'm wrong
Yeah,
and
yeah,
tell me about the things that I don't know about.
yeah. I think that's a super healthy mentality. Like I constantly learn. I got lots of people who listen to this show, who teach me stuff all the time.
Mhm.
And where stuff where also it's like our views on things change. Like
Oh,
stuff
100%.
that I would have been like, totally 100% in on 2 years ago, 10 years ago. I think it's a crock of shit now. It's like that's just normal.
Right.
We change.
Right. And we should change. And I
Mm,
think this is part of the problem is that we have reached a point in the culture where changing and evolving and growing
mm.
is actually sort of considered suspicious. You know, like if you've changed your mind about something, people are like, wait,
Yeah.
I don't trust you now. It's like, oh, are we supposed to just dig our heels in and have the
Mm.
same beliefs in perpetuity from like childhood until we drop dead? That's weird. Like, surely we should be taking in data and adjusting as time
Yeah.
goes on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
It
know.
is really weird. So, for those of you joining us back again now or listening in, may notice an awkward shift in conversation that I hope is impossible for me to edit out. The internet went again, so there's definitely level one fuckery this evening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It must be Satan. He's like, what are you doing?
yeah, the Dark Lord
I don't know.
not happy about this chat. You
Not
can't
happy.
be a witch and a Christian. I don't want this
Yeah.
getting out.
Just don't do it. It is funny though, actually. Like I was thinking, I do have some witch friends who are, very supportive of me and lovely humans, but are still like, "What are you doing? What are you doing serving the colonizer god?" And I think, for me, it just became a case of like, first of all, what works. I'm a practical person in terms of my approach to the occult, and I will do what works. And how I found my way back to this path, really. I mean, I was raised loosely Christian.
Yeah.
My mom was raised Catholic. I think you and I might have talked about this. My mother
Mm.
grew up Catholic in New Zealand in the 1950s. And for that reason, did not raise me Catholic because she had a horrible experience
Hmm.
and did not want to inflict that on me. But I still grew up in like a extended family who were Catholic. And so it was ambiently present. My
Right.
mom, I think, would still call herself a Christian. She just didn't go to Catholic church anymore. I went to religious school, all of that. And so I have that kind of um, linkage, I guess. And over the course of my life, on and off, I've gone sort of in and out of that. Um, and for me, though, the big moment really was a couple of years ago, I think. And I did talk about this on the first time I was on the spirit box. And I had this really scary sort of spirit attack situation. And I combated that with conjure techniques that included some Solomonic magic,
Right.
but also included ultimately work with Saint Michael.
Hmm.
And it was incredibly effective, like immediately, viscerally effective. And it was at that point that I was like, oh shit, well, something's happening here. Um, and I know that not everybody has that experience in terms of sorcery and magic. Actually, you and I, before we started recording, were kind of talking about
Hmm.
the individual experience of magic and sorcery and what works for one person just truly may not for another.
Yeah.
But for me, communion with the saints, appealing to the sort of higher and ultimate authority of God while doing magic and sorcery and living in that kind of like odd liminal interstitial space, which makes you kind of like doubly a heretic. You're an occultist heretic and you're also a Christian heretic.
Yeah.
You're both.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's actually nothing more witchy than being doubly ostracized
Hmm.
and sort of doubly shut out. You're not one thing
Hmm.
or the other. And that's been folklorically the case in multiple traditions again for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Big time. Big time. Like, I mean, just like you're othered in all communities,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right. This kind of weird liminality where you've got kind of a foot in both camps and you're kind of but sitting in neither is comes up again and again in folklore. There's a very famous Irish band fiasa, like a cunning woman called Biddy Early.
Oh yeah, I've heard it pretty
Yeah,
early.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was the classic abducted by fairies as a child, came back with gifts, all that kind of stuff, and was a renowned healer and
Mm-hmm.
massively psychic, all that kind of stuff. But there's stories of her like challenging the priests and all this kind of stuff, which nobody would have done at all, like, where they would have had
Mm-hmm.
like total authority, and equally priests going to her for healings as well. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's again, it's that kind of weird tension, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but also coexisting. Um, yeah, it's interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff, and
Yeah. And I think that people like yourself, Darren, probably the listeners that you have who are in, the UK or
yeah,
Ireland or parts of Europe, I think there's a greater understanding and awareness of that gray area than there perhaps is in America. That's something that I've encountered anyway.
right,
Because in in a huge number of cases in parts of the UK, right? Or I assume Ireland. I haven't been to Ireland since I was very little. But based on what I've heard from other people, these extremely Catholic sacred sites are also pagan as fuck.
oh
Like
God, yeah,
the over,
yeah,
the overlap is still there, and Americans, not all Americans, but a lot of Americans just simply don't realize that.
mm,
It the way I was raised, growing up in a rural village in the UK, in England, it was extremely blended. No one in my community would have said, oh, we're doing pagan things, but we were doing pagan
yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
under the guise of it being like just a normal part of the church community. And when I was back in the UK and going to, holy wells and stuff like that, there is really not this massive black and white binary separation.
No,
It's
not at all.
very
Yeah,
blended.
yeah, not at all. That's it. It's so true, and like even places like St. Paul's in London, like apparently that's a Dianic site that's built on.
Hmm.
It just
Hmm.
it goes way way back. And it's more about the site than the type of worship that's done on it.
Hmm.
And all like the holy wells all over the place in Ireland. It's exactly like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly like that. Um, it's really interesting, and I love looking at the names on maps of places. You can see the
Hmm.
goddesses and gods and spirits that were worshipped. Like we've got a couple of places around here called like the River Breed, and like
Mm-hmm.
and like Breedwell, which is
Right.
Brightwell, and all that kind of stuff. Is knocking about here. Um, so yeah, it has always existed. I mean, up until really post famine in Ireland,
Yeah.
Christianity was a dual practice.
Yeah.
Like it really was. Like there was stories around like Croagh Patrick, which is like the holy mountain of Ireland in
Hmm.
County Mayo. So two things. It's like it on I think it's on the quarter days, like in April and August. The sun looks like it rolls down the side of the mountain, right? So it's got
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, massive solar kind of pagan associations with that. There's loads of megalithic stuff up there, and then kind of more recently up to kind of pre-famine, like um, actually, so it gives some of the modern context, but people used to go up on their hands and knees on this mountain, right? It was like a scree covered mountain. It was a real kind of thing of penance. You go barefoot. Actually, I saw an influencer going barefoot. I took my kids up it last summer, and there was a dude going up barefoot, and I was like, fair fucks. Yeah, fair play, man. But then I saw somebody else taking a clip of him when he's like standing there, like
Oh,
contemplating. I
that's
was like,
so
oh,
funny.
dude. I mean, I admire the barefoot stuff, but I didn't know you were doing it for the gram. It just takes some of the potency out of it. Like,
Hashtag pilgrimage,
yeah, yeah, exactly. But and it's like a really first, it's a really kind of like a 45-degree angle. Actually, no, it's steeper than that. Like really kind of pyramidic mountain with covered in scree. It's a tough climb,
Mm,
you know.
mm,
And people used to go up on their hands and knees or walk up it barefoot. It was a thing of penance. They do the stations of the cross on the way up. It would be done on kind of the last. Is it the first Sunday of August, I think.
mm,
But you have that kind of like really intense kind of like penitent Catholicism, which is
mhm,
post famine. It's very Roman. Um,
mm,
Pre famine, the Catholicism was very, very different in Ireland. It still
mhm.
had a really kind of strong veins of both kind of the pagan religion and Celtic Christianity in it. Uh,
100%.
yeah, but there was some documentation about pre-famine celebrations well, certainly the 1800s, on the slopes of Croagh Patrick, where people would go up as a fertility rite. So if you could not conceive, you'd go up there to try and conceive. And then it was kind of like a little bit like a kind of a peasantry rave at the bottom of the mountain. And then
Amazing.
yeah. And then apparently at a certain hour, couples would like disappear into their little camps to try and conceive, at kind of the bottom of this holy mountain. And I often look those two stories and kind of in the space of kind of like 50 years, how the mountain was treated, totally changed, wildly, and people forget that was there, that was in that version of Catholicism.
Right. And it would not have been considered not Catholic. That's the crazy part, right?
Yeah, totally.
And you see little things. It's funny that you should mention like fertility rites. So I think this is a thing that happens the world over in Catholicism, but it's a huge thing specifically in New Orleans. Is St. Joseph's Day altars?
Okay.
And they'll set up like a big. It's in March sometime. I can't remember the exact date. Set up a big altar to St. Joseph, and you put on. Essentially, it's like a pagan altar. You put a bunch of food on there, fancy breads, fruit, cake, all sorts of other things as an offering to Saint Joseph, who of course is Catholic saints are spirits. That's what they are. They're spiritual ancestors. And there are various different sort of traditions surrounding the Saint Joseph's Day altar. But one of them is, and I saw this in church last year when I went on Saint Joseph's Day to go look at the altar. One of the traditions is that if you as a young married woman trying to conceive steal a piece of fruit from the altar, then you're blessed that you're going to be able to conceive. But very specifically, you have to steal it from the altar, which is pretty much like the most non-Catholic thing you can possibly do. Like you're thieving from a religious space. But it's done in this sort of very sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink ways. This woman, I watched her go up to the altar, sort of sidling. And of course, the altar's got sort of altar attendants. There's some sort of nuns up there. And this woman kind of sidles up, and the nun just like grabs a tangerine or something and just like hands it to this lady who wants to have a baby. And you look at things like that, and I mean, none of these people participating in this ritual or this tradition are thinking to themselves, I'm doing witchcraft, or I'm doing sorcery, or I'm doing something that's pagan. At the same time, it's not really falling under the extremely conservative by the book Catholicism that you would usually associate with, religiosity. So there's just so much nuance there that I think a lot of people overlook. And I mean, it is true. I'm not going to argue the point that biblically sorcery, divination, and all of those things are in the Bible not okay. But there are a lot of things in the Bible that aren't okay, that people get way less hung up on. Wearing blended fabrics, for example. I don't really see any of the people who are super mad about tarot and divination being upset because we're wearing, a spandex cotton T-shirt. They pick and choose pretty aggressively what they're upset about. So I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think at a certain point you just have to be like, okay, well, it works. If the tech works, right? Yeah. Just on a purely material, magical level, whatever you're doing, whether it's Solomonic magic, whether it's, working with jinn, whether it's fairy faith, whether it's conjure or some sort of folk magic or conjure that incorporates aspects of Christianity or Catholicism, whatever it might be, if it's working for you and you have done the internal work, I guess, to commune with whatever, with God as you know it, with your spirits, with your team, and everything has been sort of sorted out, I just kind of don't see a problem, and I think that really ultimately we should just get our nose out of everybody's fucking business. That's my
to be honest, I think that final sentiment is probably the best bit of advice you can give to anybody. It really, I just don't know why they care. Why do they, it just, probably not worth discussing that, but I'm baffled by it constantly. And you can talk about entitlement or it's the platforms, and it's just, but it's also, it's like, where's the self-reflection?
I just don't understand how anybody has the time. I'm a very sleepy person. I need a good 10 to 12 hours sleep a night. I do a lot of lucid dreaming. I've got a lot of shit to do. If I was spending multiple other hours a day stressing about what anybody else was doing religiously or spiritually, I would get nothing done.
totally.
I've got ADHD. That's not fucking tenable. You know what I'm saying? Like, holy fuck. I don't
Yeah,
have time
yeah,
for that.
yeah. It's also it's like soft targets, you know.
Mm.
It's like there's a certain amount of kind of like I don't know. I think like it is laziness and a puritanical vibe on both sides. Like,
Yes.
you know, occultists are as guilty, you know, but equally have limited self awareness that they are acting out in this kind of puritanical way. Um,
Yeah. There's just a lot of need, I think, to try and control other people, and
mm,
this constant question, particularly in the occult community, around gatekeeping,
mm,
uh, and whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, and what it even is. You know, I feel like
yeah,
we talk a little bit less about the whole gatekeeping issue than we did perhaps in 2020. I think anytime a community gets a large influx of people, which of
yeah,
course we did during lockdown because people
mm,
just had more time to think about
yeah,
these things.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
for a blessed moment, we all took a breath and went, "Ooh, maybe I'll get into making sourdough and becoming a witch," whatever it might be, crochet. Um, but you know, anytime a community gets a massive influx of members, I think there are going to be necessarily conversations about gatekeeping
Yeah.
and who does and does not get to do certain things. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I do think that ultimately, you know, I guess my message to anyone listening to this who is finding themselves on a path that might be transforming or changing, or they're going in a new direction and they're not sure how to feel about it, you go to sleep at night with your damn self. Like, you know, all the fucking people on Instagram leaving comments on your shit, or all the people in your little Facebook groups, or the people that, even the people that you're learning from, you know, they're not lying down with you at night inside your brain,
Mm,
with your personal relationship to spirit and God. You have to be with yourself in
mm,
that moment. So you figure out what's right for you. And there should be discernment, and there should be a pursuit of knowledge, and, you know, as we said earlier, you know, an openness to hearing differing opinions and to
mm,
learning along the way. You don't want to get so myopic and so attached to your own unverified personal gnosis that you're just in
yeah.
a weird little delusional bubble.
Yeah.
But you're with yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah. I was
It's
just laughing
you.
at the weird delusional bubble. I'm like, I don't know. I have my comfy weird delusional bubble.
I mean, we could listen. This was the other part of the conversation we were going to have, though, isn't it? Because somewhere along the line in the past 6 or 8 months, I don't know if you've seen this, but this meme, this verbal meme, has emerged. Being Delulu is the Salulu. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't. I've only recently heard. I mean, you know, I'm old, and well, you know, I'm knocking on the door at 50. Yeah, I miss most things, you know, like so any kind of like nuanced cultural memes, I'll catch up in about 5 years' time. But I've just heard the word Delulu, which I love. I think it was hilarious.
It's
So,
beautiful.
yeah. So I'm
So
glad to hear
I
that.
pass that on to you.
Yeah, thank
Being
you. I
Delulu is
yeah
the Salulu.
yeah I gratefully
Um,
graciously accept that.
and the thing of it is, though, like, if you really, it's silly sounding and it's fun, and that's kind of why I like it. Because there's also a sort of gremlin side of me that's like a little bit of a chaos magician.
Mhm.
I don't think the chaos magicians would claim me either. I think they'd be like, "The fuck is this bitch doing?" No one claims me, really. I'm just out here on a fucking hillside doing my own shit. But I do. I feel like that's kind of like a beautiful chaos magic bumper sticker, is being Delulu is the Salulu.
Yeah.
And there is an element of needing to operate in a mental space for magic to work, I think,
Mm-hmm.
where you do divest from the limits of material reality. You have to allow yourself to say, okay, this thing that I want,
Hmm.
or this future that I'm imagining for myself, it doesn't matter how many obstacles are in the way. It doesn't matter how extremely unlikely this is materially. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you do kind of have to get into that almost delusional mindset,
Hmm.
I think, in order for things to work. If you
Yeah.
start putting limits on yourself, and, you know, putting fences around what is possible in your mind, you're cutting it off from the potential to
Yeah.
manifest.
I think that makes an awful lot of sense, you know, and like like in a weird kind of inversion of it, but kind of achieves the same thing. If you look at like all those various different podcasts about, how do you achieve wealth or like tremendous health, and like the whole thing about like doing ice baths and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff, and like there's a certain amount of truth to that, but like you see consistently the message people talk about, well, talent's great, but I'm consistent, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
consistent. I write down my goals, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and like I'm consistent with it, and
Mm-hmm.
I look at that and I go, people talk about that in a very kind of formulaic way. This is how I achieve my goal. It's like you write down your goal, and then you decide what you're going to do to get that, or you cross out your fears one by one to get that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I look at that and I go, that is a form of spellcraft,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is.
and it's also a weird form of delusion, you know,
Yeah.
like what it still has, it still achieves the goal,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And consistency is a huge part of it. This is this is a takeaway from this whole podcast episode, Dara, is consistent delusion is where we should be. Be consistently delusional and you will get what you want. But I mean, it's interesting too, right? Sorry, I covered my mouth. It's interesting too, because you will find, I think, occultists and sorcerers and magicians who will say it doesn't matter if you believe that it's going to work or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you do genuinely have a relationship with, a god or a spirit or a deity or whatever, and you do the right things in the right order at the right time. I've met people who believe this. It doesn't matter what you personally as a sorcerer believe. If you do these things in this order, the result will happen. And it's very kind of scientific. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do think that the consistency and energetic relationship that you're sort of engaging in with the current, with spirit, with whatever it is that you're trying to utilize to get your goal, I think that some of that does also require the right mindset. It's a tricky one. I'm never sure exactly what side of that debate I fall on. But the story I was going to tell, we talked about, we were going to spill the beans on magic that I did last year that I'm impressed by. Anyone who's in my immediate community of people I work with has heard me enthusiastically tell the story, because I find it exciting. I love it when I do a piece of magic and I'm like, holy fuck, that worked. Oh my God, what? Huh. And particularly when there's like no way that it could be anything else.
Right.
I think we all, anyone who's listening to this who is a magician or a witch and who has done spell work, there are moments where we'll do spell work and something will pay off, but there'll be a part of you that's like, well, I mean,
Could it have? Is it? Yeah.
Maybe it was just a coincidence that this cool thing happened, which is why I've started building into my spell work. Like I get very specific. You and I were talking about this, and I also require synchronicities. I want the universe, because I'm stupid and I don't pay attention well. So I need the universe to like slap me in the face to be like, yes, that's what this was, motherfucker. So the story is this. April of last year, I broke up with my partner of 8 years in January of last year. And, that relationship had been very, very much sort of on the rocks and sad times for quite some time. And so by the time it was over, it had really been over for a lot longer than just a couple of months. And so by April of that year, I was like, I really am ready, or I feel ready to call something else into my life. And I'm friends with Alexander Moore, who's been on your show, the Hex Doctor. And he was like, just enchant for a new partner, like summon a partner. And I was kind of like, it's so funny. I literally just said that and my boyfriend texted me. Oh, creepy.
I love
Anyway,
how you were just talking about how you needed syncs. Well,
yeah. Summon a boyfriend. There he is texting. So we spoiled the ending there. It worked. So April of last year, I did this working and I'd never done anything quite like this before. I had certainly done relationship spells for other people and probably relationship spells for myself in different ways, but I'd never done a sort of what I would call a summoning. And I did it was essentially a Venusian working, where I also prayed several psalms over the candle for 7 days consistently. And I built this very highly specific list of what I wanted in a partner. I was like, you know what, if I'm weird sciencing this shit. I'm going to get so fucking specific. Like, I don't even know. And so, you know, really hyper specific about the dynamic I wanted to exist between me and this person, and what I wanted, you know, their personality to be like, and what I wanted their sense of humor to be like, and physical characteristics. I printed out like 6 to 10 different celebrities that I was like, if we could be in the vague ballpark of like young Charlie Sheen, Timothy Chalamet, that'd be great. Young Charlie Sheen in that one movie. I think there's a scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off where there's a young Charlie Sheen
in the police station.
Yes.
Yeah.
Only that Charlie Sheen. No other Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Certainly not contemporary Charlie Sheen, but that specific moment. Yes. That moment. That one shot.
That's funny.
So hyper specific. And you know, like I tried to really account for my own brain, because I know historically that with other people that I've dated, I have overlooked certain things that I shouldn't overlook. And so I was like, you know, I really want this person to be self-sufficient and independent and able to provide for themselves. I don't want to be a mother to this person. Like, we're not going to fucking do that again. Very specific.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the petition, I said, okay, and also I need there to be a very obvious synchronicity when this person comes up in my life, because I am stupid. And if there's not an obvious synchronicity, I am like on the asexual spectrum for a start. So it's hard to get me excited I mean, introverted, I'm on the asexual spectrum. It's hard to even get me out of the house to meet somebody in the first place. So I was like, there needs to be a very obvious synchronicity so that I even leave my house. Like, it's not going to happen otherwise. So I do all of that in April. And I have to tell you that at the time, because of other things that were going on in my life and just my general level of stress and depression, I honestly didn't really do this working with any particular degree of enthusiasm. I did it for 7 days consistently, but it's kind of like when you start going to the gym and you're like, ugh, all right, well, I'm on the treadmill. I'll do my fucking time, whatever. It was very lackluster, but I did it. And I was kind of expecting the results in about 3 months. I was given it 3 months time. Nothing fucking happened. It was very dismal for most of last year. And then I came back from my trip to England in August of last year, late August. And in September, I matched on Facebook dating. First of all, what the fuck? Like, what is Facebook? What the fuck is that? Yeah. No, and you shouldn't. It's terrible. Apparently not that terrible, but terrible enough. Anyway, so like, I matched on Facebook dating with this person, and I remember getting just sort of a weird vibe, like a weird intuitive vibe, pretty much instantaneously, but also being like, ugh, I just don't know. Like, you know, I was very fatigued by the idea of meeting anybody generally.
Yeah.
And using dating apps, I think, as a human being generally is a horrible experience, but as a woman, it's especially horrible. And so I was just very over it, but I forced myself to be optimistic about this situation. And I was having a conversation with this person over Instagram DMs. I think we moved things to Instagram. And at some point he messaged me. The synchronicity I'd asked for had to do with keys. I have a very lifelong personal symbolic connection with the key as a symbol. And I said in my petition, I need there to be a really obvious synchronicity around keys so that I know that this is the person that I summoned. So he and I are having this conversation on Instagram. We haven't met yet. And he's obviously looked through my pictures. And he messages me one day and he's like, so what's your personal significance with keys? And I was like, oh, I don't know. You know, I've always had kind of a weird key connection, you know. And he was like, huh, that's really interesting. He said, I've been wearing this key around my neck 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years. And I don't really know why. And I was like, interesting. And even at that moment, though, it didn't really hit me. I was like, that's weird. But my brain sort of filtered it out. Almost like I wasn't paying attention to the fact that that was the universal slap in the face. We wound up meeting in person. And the first thing that struck me when we met was I was like, wow, this person looks eerily like all of the celebrities that I put on. I mean, you saw, because I posted.
I thought it was Timothy Chalamet. Like, I was like, what is Celeste doing with Timothy Chalamet? Like, for real, I genuinely did.
Yeah, it's creepy.
This is legit, people. This is the real fucking deal.
Very strange. Please approach me on Instagram for all your lover summoning needs. I'm open for business. So yeah, we met, and we had a couple of dates, and it just became clear the more time we spent together that like pretty much everything that I had put on this petition, this person fell into that category.
It's amazing.
One of the things that I asked for, because I am massively introverted and neurodivergent and on the asexual spectrum, and that's caused issues in previous relationships. I was like, I need someone who's going to really understand that. Um, really viscerally understand that, not just like, pat me on the head and be like, okay, bud.
Yeah.
And my current boyfriend, my current partner is also asexual. Like, it's just, you could not really it's creepy.
Mm.
And he is not a particular, well, I mean, I would say he's like spiritual in some respects, but he would probably call himself an atheist. He's definitely not a religious person.
Right.
But even when I told him this whole story about how I did this summoning spell last April, he was like, that's fucking weird. He was like, because he doesn't know why he started wearing this key around his neck 5 years ago. He just kind of did. And when you consider the theory of retrocausality, it gets weird. And what the really weird thing is, like I said, I thought this spell that I did in April last year was going to take about 3 months. What happened in April last year is that he was living in Rhode Island. And in April of last year, pretty much out of nowhere, he just woke up one day and he was like, I need to move. And he didn't move to New Orleans immediately. He moved to Arizona. It took him about 6 months to make his way back to New Orleans. But April, when I did that spell, was the month that he went, I'm going to move out of Rhode Island. So, magic just sometimes takes a while to basically cast the net, I guess, and pull to you what you're asking for.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. That's really interesting. It's funny. I love the way that you've been so specific and got that response, because mine was all like sigil magic when I did a similar thing, but like writing down exactly kind of what I wanted, and I got what I wanted. Yeah, like but equally, looking back, I was like, I should have put that in there as well. So being specific is really important.
That's the funny thing, isn't it? Because the thing of it is, you can't really ever account for everything. And something, because I know Alex has been on your show talking about this kind of thing too, because he's very no nonsense when he discusses this kind of like work. I think a lot of occultists don't want to talk about things like love spells and summoning, and because it's a kind of morally
ambiguous,
weird area.
Yeah.
But I take the Eucharist every day, so I can talk about cursing and summoning. I'm good with God. I took the Jesus cookie. The Christians are so mad at me. Anyway, but Alex told me, he was like, way before any of this happened, he was like, be prepared when you get what you want, because when you get what you want, you then have to deal with having what you want, and there is no accounting for when that shows up. This is the thing, nothing is perfect. There's always going to be things that you didn't account for, things that you were a little bit blindsided by, stuff that you could have tweaked. At the same time, I just think that, particularly when you're talking about relationships or workings that involve other people, life's not perfect. Other people aren't perfect. Conflict,
it's
conflict of some kind, right, is also just part of the process.
Yeah, it's going to arise, and like the more I think about kind of like what is the point of like this kind of spirit work or magic as a whole, like when you make contact with particularly potent spirits, like stuff comes up that you need to do, and it's not always right. I need you to be, vegan and start wearing sandals or going barefoot or some shit like that. Like a lot of it is like you're going to go into the meat grinder and you're going to wonder why I've abandoned you, right? And that's going to happen, and you're going to be lost when you think you knew stuff. All of a sudden, that's going to go, and you're going to be lost like a child. And I'm going to make your shadow. You're going to face your shadow. You're going to face the shit bits of you, And
honestly, I think that really is. That's how you know that you're doing magic seriously, and that you're not like just pissing around.
It's been wonderful having you on the show. It's been great to catch up again. If people want to follow you, join your Patreon, avail of your 5-star love magic services?
Top-notch
Yeah,
services.
yeah.
Yeah. The Patreon no longer exists because I have ADHD and I couldn't do it. So you can't do that. But what you can do is find me on Instagram. I'm Celeste Mott on there. Celeste spelled as you would imagine, and Mott is Mott. And that's pretty much the only social media that I have publicly accessible, regularly update anymore. Find me there, send me a DM. I kind of do everything a little bit back channel now for various reasons, but just send me a message and we can talk and I have a website too, celestemott.com, which does have a list of kind of my services. And I do still have a system where you can book online for readings and stuff like that. I read tarot and I do trance, but my Instagram's the best way to keep up with my goings on.
Awesome. Brilliant. Well, it's been brilliant catching up with you. And
it really has. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
It's always a joy, Dara. You have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Thank you, Celeste. That was fantastic as always. If you want to find out more about Celeste, then do check out the show notes below and follow her on Insta. She always has some great insight to share, not just in magic, but in kind of life in general. Okay, that's it from me. I'm Dara Mason. You've been listening to The Spirit Box. Take care and talk soon.